We are in Torah Yud Chet in the Likutei Moharan called Kartalita, the treasure chest. And we spoke about a bunch of concepts up until now that we're going to start seeing in today's class how they fit into the story that this Torah is based on. So the story that we had from the Gemara in Baba Batra with Rabbi Yonatan related the story that once they were traveling and they were at sea and they were in the ship and they saw this this chest or this basket. They saw this chest that was that had these jewels and these pearls that were set in the chest. And surrounding this treasure chest that they found in the sea, they saw in the sea at the bottom, were these type of fish called birsha. And we saw that they were dangerous fish. They were not friendly, not the friendly kind. And they sent a diver down to retrieve the treasure chest. And then the diver felt that one of the fish, one of the birsha fish, was trying to sever his thigh. Okay, so these fish were kind of like protecting the treasure chest. And so what did he do? He threw a flask of vinegar at the fish, and that caused them to flee the whole area. But then there was this heavenly voice that came, that proclaimed and said, "What have you to do with the basket, with this chest, with this treasure chest? Because it belongs to the wife of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, that one day in the next world, in the world to come, she will use this basket. She stores the Techeilet, the blue wool for the tzitzit of the tzaddikim in the world to come in this chest, in this treasure chest." And so basically the bat call, the heavenly voice, was telling them to leave this treasure chest alone. And so that's the story. But now we're going to see how the concepts that we spoke about up until now are represented, alluded to in the story. So the first part of the story is the Kartalita de mikbe'e ba'avanim tovot. This treasure chest that has the jewels and the pearls set in it. What is that representing? So Kartalita, we had the Rashbam, the commentary of the Rashbam, that explains that that's an argaz, a box, a chest. Argaz, the word argaz, which means a box, it also sounds like the word rogez, says Rabbi Nachman. Rogez means in Hebrew wrath or anger. Argaz ze bechinot rogez hanal, va'avanim tovot ze bechinot atara hanal, bechinot rachmanut hanal. So the treasure chest is called, the chest itself is called, the box is called a argaz, which sounds like rogez, which means anger, which represents the anger energy in the formula that we presented before. And then the jewels and the pearls that are set in this box represent the compassion, the rachmanut, that we use to sweeten the anger energy. And so that's the combination of the jewels within the box. It's the compassion that sweetens the anger energy. And that's what that part of the story is alluding to. Next part is Vehadrila mine de chavre de mikre birsha. There were these fish, the birsha fish, that were surrounding the treasure chest. What is that representing? Ze bechinot emunah ki ma'amar tachat ha'na'atzutz ya'ale berosh. Ze Mordechai v'nikra Yehudi Hashem shekafar ba'avodat elilim ki ma'amar kol ha'kofer be'akum nikra Yehudi. And so the birsha fish, Rabbi Nachman said, sounds like the word berosh. What's berosh? The berosh is a word that is in the pasuk in Megillat Esther that means the cypress tree. And the drasha on that pasuk is that it's referring to Mordechai. Tachat ha'na'atzutz ya'ale berosh. In place of the thorn will sprout a cypress tree. So berosh is the cypress tree, and it's referring to Mordechai. And Mordechai is called Mordechai HaYehudi because he's the one who denies and cancels out idolatry, idol worship, the corrupt belief systems of idol worship. And so the Baruch, which is referring to Mordechai, who is the power that cancels out the idol worship and the belief systems of idol worship, is this birsha, the birsha That's what it sounds like, Baruch. And Baruch is Mordechai. And Mordechai is Mordechai HaYehudi. And Mordechai HaYehudi is called that because he cancels out the other belief systems, the idol worshippers' belief systems. And so that's the part in the formula that we spoke about, the Emunah, which is the opposite of the wrath. The anger of Hashem is expressed in the world when there is a lack of belief and trust in Hashem. And that's represented by the idol worship that is in the world. And so these are the birosh, the birsha fish. That's what they're representing. Okay, now let's see the continuation of this in Od Gimel. Now we're up to part 3 in this Torah. ולפעמים חושב אדם בעצמו שיש לו רחמנות על העולם ורוצה בהנהגתו, ובאמת זהו הרודף אחר הכבוד ותולה רדיפתו ברחמנות. ובאמת הוא רחוק מרחמנות הזה. So up until now we spoke about how the tachlit, the purpose of everything in the whole world, the reason why Hashem created the world, and the initial purpose, the initial intention in creating the world was for us to experience eternal, infinite bliss. And that's the divine bliss that we can only experience by direct experience of Hashem, a direct experience of the divine. And that's something that we'll experience in the world to come, but there is a way to connect to it in this world as well. And we spoke about how that happens to the extent that we have a connection, that we have a part in those holy souls, the leaders, the collective souls of the nation, of the generation. When we have a part in those souls, then to the extent that we have a part in those souls, we are able to tap into that final purpose, that endless, infinite, divine bliss already now and already here in this physical world. And then we have to understand how can we expand and increase our connection and our part in these holy souls. And we explain that that happens to the extent that we crown the humble holy souls with a crown of compassion. Okay, and the crown of compassion, it's what will cause them to lead the generation, even though naturally they are not feeling compelled. They're not feeling compelled to lead the generation. And we spoke about why they're not feeling compelled. They're not feeling compelled to lead the generation. They themselves will maybe answer it up, and they will say the reason is because they are not worthy of it, and that's why they flee the positions of authority. But on a deeper level, what's happening is that they are souls that have included themselves in the oneness of Hashem. And so they don't see themselves or feel themselves or experience themselves as a separate entity. And so whatever they are feeling inside is really just an extension of Hashem. And in a state where Hashem has concealed his face and his countenance from us, from leading us in a clear way, from taking care of us in a clear way, in a revealed way. And that state of the world, that concealment of Hashem's countenance, then those holy souls that are experiencing an extension, what Hashem is experiencing, they will naturally also flee those positions of authority and leadership, and they will not want to take that crown. But we explained that deficiency that they are experiencing is really a deficiency, a concealment that is being experienced by the sphere of Malchut, which is the final sphere, which represents the kingship of Hashem. And when that is separated or lost in exile, so then this is this experience that we have, the concealment of Hashem's countenance. The leadership, the guidance of Hashem is hidden from us. And that's why they, in extension, those holy souls in extension who are included in that Malchut will also hide their faces from the generation. But we explained that exile of the Malchut happens because of the idol worship in the world. Idol worship is the complete opposite of Malchut of Hashem. When you give the Malchut, when you are coronating and giving authority and power to any other person, place, or thing, or energy in the universe, then that is called idol worship. And so that's the essence, that's the definition of the Malchut in exile. And so that is also what anger is all about. When a person is angry, when a person is lacking the patience and the serenity and the inner peace, and therefore they have these flames of anger take over them, and they allow those flames of anger take over them, then that is idol worship, because that comes from a lack of recognition that there is one, and everything is peace and everything is good. To the extent that we recognize that behind everything that is happening in this present moment, in every present now, there is only the one divine essence that includes all of existence, and therefore everything is perfect and everything is wonderful. And when a person loses that recognition and falls into all of these problems and challenges and adversity from the outside world, and that causes them to fall into anger. But Emunah is the cure to that. Emunah is that recognition in the present moment, the beingness in the now that is absolutely perfect, constantly. And that's Hashem's presence. Hashem is called Mikomo Shel Olam, the space of all space, the space that contains all space within it. And that means that behind everything, on top, everything is within Hashem. And so when you can tap into that space of all space, there's absolute perfection in every situation. There's no place for anger. And obviously, there's no idol worship, because you're recognizing that there's only one existence, Hashem Echad. And then you are able to draw this compassionate energy to the Malchut. And the compassionate energy sweetens it. And the compassionate energy, we also explained, is about drawing that connection to the heart. In any situation of anger, of hatred, of frustration, of depression, there is a disconnect from the heart in that situation. But as to the extent that we're able to connect to our feelings in the heart and the feelings of the other individual in that situation, and what are the needs behind those feelings, then you're listening to the heart, and the heart is the source of compassion. And so that's how you're sweetening the anger energy with compassion. And so when you do that, that compassion becomes a crown on the heads of those holy collective souls, the leaders of the generation that we are calling the humble souls. And they're humble because they don't see themselves as a separate entity. They have dissolved their ego. And then that crown of compassion compels them to lead the generation, even though maybe without that, they would seek to flee those positions of authority. And so Rabbi Nachman now is speaking about how sometimes a person may fool themselves into thinking that they have this compassion for the generation, and therefore they think that they're, because of their compassion for the generation, that's the reason why they want to lead the generation. But that's just them fooling themselves, and they're not aware of something else that's happening underneath. And so that's something that we have to point out and explain at this point. ולפעמים חושב אדם בעצמו שיש לו רחמנות על העולם ורוצה בהנהגתו, ובאמת זהו הרודף אחר הכבוד ותולה רדיפתו ברחמנות, ובאמת הוא רחוק מרחמנות הזה. He says sometimes a person thinks that he himself feels compassion for the world, and because of his compassion, he wants to lead the world, because we said that the true leader, the worthy leaders, are leaders that are not leading generation because of their own ego. They've dissolved their ego. The only reason why they're leading generation is because of a sincere compassion for the generation. That's the crown of compassion that they've been given. But sometimes a person can fool himself into thinking that he has this crown of compassion when in fact he does not. And really, he is just chasing after the glory and the honor in those positions of authority for his own benefit, for his own ego desire, his own ego benefit, his own ego fulfillment. And so that's something a person has to be careful, has to pay attention to, not to fool themselves into that. And so what is the important point here? And that's what he says now. As long as a person has not come to absolute, complete belief and trust in Hashem. And the belief and trust in Hashem is not a thought. Many people are mistaken into thinking that it's a thought. Oh, yeah, I believe. They hear, oh, it's a good thing to believe and trust in Hashem. So they say, fine, yeah, I believe, for sure I believe, for sure I trust. It's not just something that you say, It's an experience. It's a state of consciousness. And at this state of consciousness of belief and trust in Hashem, at its core is really the dissolution of the illusion of the ego, the separateness. That's what Emunah is when you dissolve that illusion of the separate being, the ego, and you recognize, not just recognize intellectually, but you experience in your state of consciousness, you experience that there is only a Hashem Echad. And if a person is lacking in that, in any degree, he's not absolutely, completely perfect in that state of consciousness and that dissolution of that illusion of the ego, that dissolution of the ego, then if he has any amount of that still left in him, that ego, then he is not worthy of that leadership, of that authority, of leading the generation. And so then, if he does think that he is worthy because he has the compassion for the generation, but he knows that his state of Emunah is not absolutely perfect, then he knows that on some level it's the ego that is seeking to have that position of authority. ואפילו מי שמאמין באיזה דבר שהוא מדרכי האמורי, אף על פי שהוא מאמין בהשם יתברך, בוודאי אין לו לקבל המנהיגות. כי המנהיגות עיקרה בבחינת רחמים, ועיקר הרחמים בהצהרת עכו"ם, אפילו שמץ עכו"ם, ואפילו כשאומר צבי הפסיקו, אין לו רחמנות בשלמות, וכן אין לו לקבל המנהיגות. And so says Rabbi Nachman, even if he thinks that he believes completely in Hashem, but he also believes that there are other elements in the universe that can have an influence on his success or lack thereof, then to the extent that he believes even a little bit in something else aside from Hashem, he believes completely in Hashem. Yes, Hashem is God, Hashem creates everything, Hashem created everything, everything is because of him, everything happens because of him, everything is saturated by his presence, but he also believes that there's another element in the world, there's another element in the universe that can have an influence, can have a say in his luck factor, in his success. And if he has such a belief, such an other belief, then his Emunah is not considered pure, it's not considered complete, and then he cannot take upon himself that position of authority and leadership because he is lacking in that compassion. Compassion is not just a compassion that we use our heart to connect to other people, but compassion is a divine compassion, comes from a high place called Dat Elyon. That's the source of it, and it's a state of divine consciousness that is the source of all compassion. It's unconditional love and unconditional compassion, which can only be derived from the divine, from Hashem himself. And that's why, to the extent that a person believes in other things aside from Hashem, even though he also believes in Hashem, then his Emunah is not complete. And if his Emunah is not complete, that state of divine consciousness is not complete, then his compassion is lacking on some level. And then he doesn't have that state of compassion to be able to lead the generation, because the leadership, leading, guiding others must come from a perfect state of compassion. And so he gives us an example. He says, what does it mean that he believes in something else? So something that's called darchei ha'emori, which is the Gemara's term for superstitions. And one of them was that if a deer would cross their path, then it was a bad omen, it was a bad sign. You know, nowadays people speak about a black cat also, right? So, or going under a ladder, or a mirror that shatters, or umbrellas. They have all these things, all these superstitions. Well, so that's what darchei emori is. That's what the Gemara calls darchei emori. So if he believes that these things actually have a say, they actually influence, and they're actually factual to any degree, then that's a lack in complete Emunah in Hashem. That's a lack of belief that everything at the end of the day is only from Hashem, because of Hashem, and everything happens for the good, everything is wonderful, and everything is perfect, and there's perfection. Even if I don't see it, there's perfection in the beingness in every present moment, in every present now. But if he believes in these superstitions, then there's a lack in that belief, in that faith. And so therefore his state of compassion is lacking, is deficient. And then he cannot lead others, because leadership must come from that perfect state of compassion, divine compassion, unconditional love and compassion. אפילו מי שיש לו אמונה גדולה, עד שיפשפש את עצמו, שלא יישאר אצלו אמונות שאין צריך להאמין, כגון דרכי האמורי, הנ"ל, ושיהיה תמים עם השם אלוהיו, אז הרחמנות באמת ולא ראוי להנהיג. And so he says that until this person, even if a person has great faith, he has great emunah, great belief and trust in Hashem, that he has really a high state of divine consciousness, but he recognizes through a process of self-inquiry, he recognizes through cheshbon hanefesh that he is still believing in other things, he still has some level of superstitions that he believes in, then that means that his belief and trust in Hashem is not complete, and he is lacking, deficient in what the pasuk calls tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elohav, im Hashem Elokecha, the pasuk in Devarim that says that you should be total, you should be completely faithful with Hashem, meaning your heart has to be complete with Hashem. If you believe in something else aside from Hashem, whenever there's a yeah but, whenever you put the but in your belief and trust in Hashem, then there's a yeah but, I believe in Hashem, but there are also other things that can have an effect or an influence, then those yeah buts get in the way of complete emunah in Hashem and complete compassion, and then he cannot lead if he has that deficiency in his compassion. But otherwise, if he has that complete belief and trust, then his compassion is true, is real, is complete, is perfect, and then he is actually deserving and actually worthy of that, of leading the nation, because that's what the nation needs. The nation needs people like that. Then he says like this, אבל מי שאין לו אמונה בשלמות ונדמה לו שיש לו רחמנות על העולם ורוצה להנהיג את העולם, זה בחינת והמלכות יהפך למינות, כי מעט המינות פוגם במלכות בבחינת ההנהגה, ומהפכה למינות כמו שמהפך את המלכות לעצמו שהוא מין מעט. And this is very, very important point here. And so he says, a person that is lacking that complete faith and complete belief and trust, if he's deficient on any level in that complete belief and trust, then even though it seems to him that he has complete compassion for the world, and that's why he wants to lead them, but really, in truth, he's fooling himself. In truth, what is happening is that this is the aspect of what the Gemara describes and speaks about the end of days, how the government will be turned to heresy. Hamalchut te'afech leminut. What is that describing? The government is an aspect of malchut. So it's the literal translation is the government. But on a deeper level, it means that people have taken the malchut of Hashem, the kingship of Hashem, and they have turned it into heresy, because they are taking the leadership. Leadership is the energy of kingship, the energy of malchut, and they're taking it for themselves. What does it mean they're taking it from themselves? They haven't completely dissolved their ego. They're not complete in their belief and trust in Hashem, and so they're not complete in their compassion. Compassion is also comes from selfless. So it's a dissolving of the ego. So now I can focus on the other person's needs from that pure place, from that pure selfless place. And if a person is deficient in that, so then what he's doing is taking the malchut for himself, for his ego. And that's called malchut. That's called a malchut te'afech leminut. The malchut will turn into heresy. Why is that? So says Rabbi Nachman that even a small amount of heresy, even a small amount of a small corruption in the belief system, in the holy belief system, a small deficiency in absolute complete belief and trust in Hashem already is enough to undermine the leadership, to undermine the malchut, to cause harm, to cause a blemish in the malchut, to cause exile to the state of malchut. Even a small amount of that that heresy, even a small amount of that lack, a small deficiency in that belief, in that complete belief. And then what that does is that it turns the malchut into minut. You're taking the malchut of Hashem, you're giving the crown of Hashem to those superstitions. You're giving the crown of Hashem to all of those other things that you're attributing power to. Okay? And just like, and then that person himself is taking the crown of Hashem and putting it on his own head for his own personal benefit, for the gain of his own ego. And so that he's turning himself into a min. Okay, he's turning himself into that idol. He's turning himself into that heretic, into that heresy. And so that's what Rabbi Nachman says until here. I think we'll see that's next part of this Torah, Ot Dalid, in the next class, Bezrat Hashem. 1 second.